During a high school class project, my teacher told me it's unrealistic being a CEO. It's been my dream to be a CEO since I was 10. So I told her, it is realistic. Follow me on my journey to learn what it takes to become a CEO. Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the Realistic CEO podcast. Today I'm here with Megan Burke. How you doing today, Megan?
I'm doing pretty well. Thanks very much. How are you doing today?
Great. I want to just thank you for taking the time out of your day to come on. So thank you for that.
Sure. It's my pleasure.
So for the first question I do want to ask you is, can you tell us a little bit about what you do here at the Community Foundation?
Sure. So here at the Community Foundation, what I like to tell people is that I do a little bit of everything. And frankly, sometimes if I'm just meeting people on the street and they're like, oh, where do you work? I'm like, oh, I work at the Community Foundation. I just do a little bit of everything there. And I do think in many ways that's the job of the president and CEO, to really pitch in wherever I'm needed. So sometimes that means if we're thinking about the grants that we make or the scholarships that we make, I pitch in and help review applications or review scholarship applications. I also meet with some of our donors and fund holders to think about how we can better support their giving in the community. And then sometimes I do things like look at our budget or meet with our board members and make sure that they're engaged in our work. So really across the board, a little bit of everything.
That's awesome. So can you tell us a little bit about your background, like your journey to how you got to where you are today?
Sure. Wow. I think that the key answer is I definitely never imagined, one, that I would work at a community foundation. When I was a kid, I didn't even know what that was, and nor that I would be the CEO or president of anything. And even when I applied for this job, I almost didn't apply because I just didn't picture myself as the president and CEO of a community foundation. And weirdly, maybe that's why I got the job, because I remember talking to the recruiter and she was like, I think you should really apply. And I was like, I don't know. I don't think that's what I like to do, or I don't see myself doing it. And I think maybe a little bit of that was not having seen people that I thought were like me doing the job. But I think I'm not totally answering your question, but I think what I learned was that anyone can do any job and different people might bring something different to it. And every place needs something different at a different time. I will say, just before this job, I worked at a different community foundation, and that was my kind of first exposure to community foundations. I worked at the one in Hartford, where I was responsible for the grant making program there. And I did that for a few years. And before that, I actually worked much more on kind of international stuff. So I worked for many years for an organization that tries to prevent the use of anti-personnel landmines and cluster munitions around the world, because they harm civilians more than a lot of other weapons that people use in war. So for that organization, I did a whole bunch of different things. Research. I worked on an annual report they did. I met with survivors of landmine and cluster munitions. I met with governments to convince them to stop using them. And eventually I became the executive director of that organization.
Wow. Like, what was your first job that you ever had, and what was some of the experience that you learned?
I think my very first job was babysitting. That's probably, I'm not sure if you mean going way back, but back in the day when babysitters earned $2 an hour, that's what I did in high school. And then I had other kind of jobs when I was in high school and college. And I mention those jobs, even if they're not necessarily like my professional jobs, because I think every job you do, you learn new things. So I worked scooping ice cream. I worked at a clothing store. I worked at a jewelry store. And I think you learn all kinds of things about working with people, different people. Sometimes people get really a little bit angry when they're getting ice cream, which you wouldn't necessarily expect, but you learn to deal with that. Once I was done with college, I think my first job, real professional job, I actually had moved to New York City, which was pretty exciting. And I worked for an organization that was putting together a global conference, really to think about. It was actually in 1999. And the idea was to say, as we go into a new century, which makes me feel really old as I say this, let's think about how we can work together in the world to do things to make the world a better place. So that was my first professional job, and it was pretty cool.
Well, that's awesome.
Yeah. I got really lucky, I think.
So, when you went to college, what were you studying?
So I went to college and I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. And luckily I was allowed to try to figure it out. But I majored in political science and I have a minor in economics. So I actually will say when I went to visit the college that I ended up going to for visiting students day, they had different professors doing like lectures or so you could get an idea of what class would be like. And I went to one, and I'll say when this was because it's interesting, I guess. It was in the year, I guess it must have been 1991. And the professor was talking about the conflict in the Middle East and and he was a political science professor, and how for decades there's been conflict and all of the like historic origins of that. And I was just like fascinated. I was like, wow, this is like the hardest thing in the world to solve. And I want to be part of thinking about things like that are really hard. And sadly, it's still one of the hardest things to solve in the world because we don't have a solution. But I think that's what kind of inspired me to think about wanting to be a political science major.
I feel like we've always are still in that field, just like at a different way of working it. It's like for you, like going from being political science to like your first job working international to then going and start doing like work like landmines and cluster mines. So now, like at the community foundation, where you're helping other people, so like, how did all of those experiences lead to where you are today?
Yeah, it's a fabulous question. And I guess one thing I would say is like when opportunities present themselves, I think people should take them. I never mapped this out as like the career that I was going to have. But I think along the way, I learned of exciting things and I said, hey, I'm just going to go for it. I will say, I think that I always knew I wanted to do something that made me feel like whatever I was doing was making the world a better place. And I think you can do that in so many different ways. And probably all jobs do this in some way. You maybe are making someone's day better or your community better. But I think I wanted to do it on a little bit bigger scale. And so I do think that is a common thread. I started out thinking like, oh, these big global issues are the way that I really want to make the world a better place. And I want to think about helping people who are impacted by war. And then as I went through life, I started to realize that every issue in the world is a local issue somewhere. So like the impact of landmines on people in Colombia or Mozambique, like I would meet like individual people from like villages in Colombia or Mozambique. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is like a problem that's impacting their village. It's impacting their ability to get to school or their economy. And so later in life, I was trying to think about how to use my time in the best way and think about where I can have the greatest impact. And I started to realize that doing it closer to home might actually be more fulfilling for me. That seeing the impact a little bit more on a regular basis might be even better. And I just think there's so many great things happening in this community, certainly here in Springfield, where we are right now, but really all up and down the valley in Massachusetts, and really trying to make sure that everybody knows this is a great place and that if we kind of work together, we can make it even better.
That's awesome. I think it's funny how you said you started working with, wanted to be international and help international. So work helping local. And for me, I want to do the opposite. So I want to start off working local in Springfield and then end up moving international. So I thought that was cool how your journey is like working
in reverse. No, I think if you feel good about making change and making the world a better place, there's so many different ways to do that. And certainly right now, starting here is a great way to do that. And maybe you'll want to keep doing it because we could really use some great people working on making this place even better.
Definitely. So for you, you said you didn't even really feel like you were going to want this position, but you still did it anyways. Like why did you take the position?
Yeah, I mean, I think I loved the job I had at the Hartford Foundation, which is the community foundation in Hartford. I was part of their community impact team. We have a community impact team here too. And I was really working like all the time directly on getting money out into the community to support the amazing work that nonprofits do there, helping students, doing all these things. And I felt there was no better job in the world in a way. And so when this job came up, I actually was worried that it would take me a little bit further from that work that I really loved. And so I think that was part of it. And I also just wasn't sure I was ready to like be the leader. It took a lot of convincing, I think, by the recruiter, but also by myself to recognize that I was ready. And that actually, I always felt a little weird. Lived here in this community in West Springfield, and I was driving down to Hartford every day to think about what people there were doing. And it occurred to me that, like, why not do it right here where I'm like raising my son and living my life and doing my grocery shopping. And so this is like part of this journey to see the impact much more locally on what I was doing. Started out globally, and then I was like, oh, wait, I can do it in Hartford. And I'm like, wait, I can do it right here. And yeah, I think that's what pushed me to do it. I also have a much shorter commute now, so I could spend more time either working or with my family and not fighting traffic in Hartford.
So you talked about how you like to help the communities. It's like, what has been like some common and like what are some similarities and differences that communities that are thriving and struggling like internationally?
Such a great question. I mean, there's obviously huge differences between a country that's been impacted by war for decades and the impact, but versus a place like this, which we don't have a war going on here, which is awesome. And we're really fortunate to be in that position. But I think that the challenges often are related to who's involved in making decisions about a community. And I think that when you get people who are closest to whatever the challenges might be in a community involved in thinking about how it can be better, you always have a better result. And so I think another kind of key theme of my whole career has been recognizing that there's amazing ideas. Like, people have fabulous ideas and they totally get what their own challenges are. And they have great ideas of how to solve them. And oftentimes people who are in decision-making positions don't really tap into that because they think they have a lot of great ideas. And they may, but they may not have all the good ideas. And so really thinking about, like, when you're trying to make any community a better place, like, who's involved in those conversations, who's part of thinking about that. And in some ways we do that kind of indirectly here at the Community Foundation. But I think in an important way, we look for those nonprofits who are really working closely with people in the region and getting their input and are really made up of the folks that they're trying to serve, because we know that they're going to be the most effective at resolving the issues those folks might be facing or removing barriers or creating opportunities. And in a way, we get to make sure that we're living that philosophy of really supporting the work that brings people right into kind of being their own agent for change. Maybe a little bit jargony way of putting it, but like putting people in the driver's seat to making their own lives as meaningful as possible.
So for you, from you first started working here till now, like what has probably been like your favorite experience that you had?
Wow, that's a great question. So I've been here now a little over 2.5 years. I still feel like I'm learning new things every single day. I have an amazing team, and it's just a really fun place to work because of that. So that's like super positive. But I think probably what kind of keeps me going the most is when I'm actually not sitting in this office, but when I'm either maybe visiting one of the nonprofit partners we have, I'm seeing firsthand the great work that they do, or a piece of this work that I didn't know I would love so much that I was a little surprised. So as you probably know, the Community Foundation is really made up of the resources of lots of folks from our community who pool those resources together. And we have a little bit of extra, and we want to share this to make this community a better place. And one of the things that I've really loved is meeting those folks who are able to contribute resources. So our donors, our fund holders, and sit down with them and really support them in thinking about how they want to use the money that they've earned in their lifetime to give back to the community and what they think would be most effective. And you hear some kind of amazing stories of folks who, it's not always this story, but sometimes you hear from folks who started off in life with very little and had some opportunities and were able to start a business, grow that business, be super successful economically, however we term that. And then they're in a position to say, someone help me out. How can I help somebody else out? And that's like, kind of gives me chills. So That's a really awesome part of my job.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So we actually recently created a nonprofit called Realistic Lemonade to help push our mission.
Oh, so this is the first time I'm hearing about Realistic Lemonade. Can you tell me a little bit more about it?
Yeah, so Realistic Lemonade is a nonprofit that we created in order to push our mission more. And our mission is to help kids go after their dreams, but not only go after their dreams, but also teach kids about the C-suite. Because what I realized is that a lot of kids don't even know what the C-suite was. And I thought it was normal because like I grew up with my dad, he was always talking about the C-suite. And then when I go into the schools, I always ask, does anybody know what a CEO is or the C-suite? And only a very few of my kids can raise their hand and explain it. So I like to go into these schools and help them know what it is, because what I've learned is that not everybody's going to be a CEO or the CFO or the CMO or the COO or not even a CTO, but everybody will always fall in that one of those categories. And what we're doing is we're really teach them, okay, maybe I'm really good at attention. Maybe I'm not going to be the CMO, but I will work in the marketing team. I'm good at operations. So I understand how to build systems to help our class improve better. So that maybe I might not be the chief operating officer, but I know how to work and I'll be in that department. Or maybe I really love numbers. So then I might not be the CFO again, but I might be an accountant or be in that group. So that's really the goal of what we're doing, is to really help kids open their minds and realize that their dreams are very possible and it's super realistic.
That's great. So you're doing this now mostly in Springfield schools. What age group?
So we did literally from preschool till university. Like
Wow.
Yeah, that's been.
You must have to really change your message a little bit depending on the age.
Honestly, believe it or not, it's really not that big of a shift. It just might be. So what I do when I'm doing like elementary school, instead of saying directly about CEO, like I would ask them if they know what a CEO is, but I'll break it down in more terms like if they know what a line leader is, and then help them realize that the CEO, like the line leader.
Oh, that's a great example.
So the messaging is the same, but we just use different words where each audience can understand it a little better. Yeah.
Have you thought about working at all maybe with some of the community groups in Springfield as well? So like perhaps the Martin Luther King Family Center or the Boys and Girls Club, where you might have a different setting where they're also working with kids of the same age?
So we actually interviewed Shannon Rudder from MLK.
Yep.
And we're all trying to work on something that we can do with them. Yeah.
That sounds like a great opportunity. They're doing amazing work. So I feel like that would be a great partnership. Yeah. And definitely if there's other there's so many great groups here in Springfield that are working with young folks. The Urban League, New North Citizens Council, Boys and Girls Club, Junior Achievement. I think you probably already have some connections with lots of those, but if there's anything we can do to help make those connections, like that's what we're here for.
Thank you. Yeah, and the last year we started with Realistic CEO, but now with Realistic Lemonade, which is what we created the nonprofit we created over the summer. Last year, we were able to distribute 5,000 copies of Realistic CEO.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a ton. And that's just in Springfield schools?
Yeah, mainly.
It's amazing. Wow. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And honestly, the feedback is really why we kept going, because when I'm going into these schools, like the students, I know what it is to have a speaker going to the school and you're not really engaging it, but these students were really like engaged and like genuinely coming out to me and having actual conversations after.
That's great. And do they have a lot of questions when you're presenting?
Yeah.
That tells a lot too, right?
Yeah. So honestly, my favorite story I like to share is that we went to Bowling Elementary School last year, and I don't know how we ended up getting to this conversation about Fortnite, and I ended up playing Fortnite with a couple of them from like when they got to school at 9 p.m. And I got played at 9 because I knew they had to go to bed. So I was like, yeah, I'm getting off, so it's time to go to bed. Yeah, but it's been super cool because like I know. And like, even when I was playing with them, they were like, I'm playing with a real author and I'm playing with a real CEO. So like for them now, they're knowing, people that are in your position are humans so that they can achieve their dreams as well.
And frankly, they're seeing someone who is from their own community, who maybe looks a little bit like they do or their family members, and they're seeing that person in that kind of role. And I think that's really exciting.
Thank you. We spoke at SciTech, and when we were done speaking, the kids were coming up to us and like thanking us, wanting to take pictures, and even we're just sharing more like their dreams and goals. And one of the teachers actually brought us in. She was like, "You guys are like the first speakers where the students actually came up to after and thanked them to come to speak." So to me, that means that what we're doing is impactful to a point where the students actually do believe that what we're saying, like they can actually achieve.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're like changing lives. It's cool.
Thank you. Yeah, for me, like it's weird because like to me, I'm not like a superhero, but to like the kids that were going to these schools, like they really look up to me and realize that if I could do it, they can do it as well.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think that's great. It's so hard at that when you're in school, maybe you're in high school or whatever, and you're like, God, now I have to figure out what I'm going to do with the rest of my life. And it's so hard, but to have an exciting example of what could be possible, that's great.
Thank you. I already shared we have to distribute 5,000 copies of Realistic CEO last year. So our big goal is 500,000 in the next 5 years.
Wow, you're going to have to get outside of Springfield.
Yeah. So Springfield, really what this part is, I wanted this to be like the first stop where like I'm giving back to the community that I grew up in first. And then how we're able to do it is we have community reinvestment partners, and so we have like local businesses inside of Springfield so we make it so that the schools don't have to pay for it, but they also get time on the standout truck. And also they get an ad inside the Realistic CEO podcast magazine. Yeah.
That's a great partnership.
How could we work together to make something happen?
That's a great question. Yeah, I think there could be a lot of great ways we could work together. Certainly, if you have a nonprofit and you're doing some great work, you might want to come in and ask for some funding from us, because we do provide grants to nonprofits in this area. And we have one main grant opportunity every year. It's called our flexible funding. And we call it that because we give all general operating support, so it's not restricted to a particular project, because we think nonprofits know best how to use their own resources, and we really want to support the mission overall. So you might look into that. We recently closed the application process, but we'll have it open again in the future, so follow us to find out more information about that. But there might also be some other ways to partner, and I'd love to hear your ideas of what that might look like.
Definitely. So honestly, what we like to do is we really like to go into schools, and really our main mission is to be able to give our book Realistic a CEO to the students, because we want them to have it as a way to chase their dreams and realize that their dreams can come true. So before I answer that question, because I want to go into actually read the book.
Please go ahead.
So the book is called I Am a CEO, Realistic CEO. In the sunny town of Jeanville, there lived a boy named Tony with a big, bright dream. One day, in Mrs. Parker's class, Tony announced, "When I grow up, I'm going to be a CEO, a Chief Executive Officer." Mrs. Parker smiled and said, "That's a big dream, Tony. Maybe think of something a bit more realistic." Tony's eyes sparkled. "But it is realistic. I have a plan," he said with confidence. "I will read lots of books and learn about business," Tony explained, holding up a book titled Lemonade Book. "And I will practice by starting a lemonade stand. It will be the best in town," said Tony, while sharing a drawing of his stand. Mrs. Parker was surprised. "That's quite a start, Tony, but being a CEO is more than lemonade." "I know," Tony nodded. "I will meet and interview successful CEOs, business owners, founders, presidents, executives, and community leaders. I will learn from them. I'll learn to make good decisions and solve problems." Tony continued, "I also learn to be kind and help others, just like a good leader." Mrs. Parker smiled. "Tony, I think you just might be a CEO one day." With a beaming smile, Tony said, "I'll do the LBW, and I'll practice the 5 types of work. They are work hard, work smart, work right, network, and teamwork. You'll see, Mrs. Parker." Years later, Mrs. Parker read a newspaper with a familiar face on the cover. Tony, CEO of more than Lemonade Inc. She remembered the little boy with the big dream. "He did it," she whispered with pride. It's the space to turn. All right. Back in Dreamville, Tony, now a CEO, smile. Dreams do come true with the 5 types of work, along with self-belief in action. The LBW, the long, lonely, boring work. And in his office, the drawing of his lemonade stand hung on the wall. Remember, no dream is too big if you believe in yourself, are willing to work for it. Create a simple, realistic plan and follow it through to execution. Everyone has a special dream that can change the world. What's yours? And that's the book.
That's awesome.
And
I love that. Thank you for reading that to me.
I always like to ask the guests a couple of questions about
Sure.
like after I read it.
Yep.
Tony, he talks about the 5 types of work. So I'm going to go through each one. I'm going to ask you what each work means to you.
Okay.
So the first type of work is to work hard. So what does working hard mean to you?
I think one of the things about working hard is recognizing that sometimes you just have to get something done by a certain time because you're going to miss an opportunity or whatever. And ideally you plan ahead and you just get it done and during normal work hours, but every now and then you got to spend a little bit of time outside of work. You try and make up for it later, knock off a little early on a Friday, but sometimes you just have to pull it out and get it done.
So what does working smart mean to you?
I think working smart for me means really looking ahead on my calendar and planning things out and saying, yep, I got these certain things that are priorities. I got to get them done. If I don't block time for it, I'm going to get it caught up in that, like every single little thing that crosses my desk every day. And I constantly could be pulled in a million directions. But I tend to get to work at about 8 o'clock and I hold 8 to 9 every morning to go through what I have for the day and just make sure I'm sticking to my schedule.
So the next type is working right. So what does working right mean to you?
Working right. I think it is following your values and your convictions and sticking to those and recognizing that, again, like things may change out there in the world. Some people may have other opinions, but if you've really thought through what your values are, you should hold on to them and not be swayed.
So the next type of work is network. So what does networking mean to you?
Networking, I think, is incredibly important for a community foundation, but it really, I think, means like knowing you can't do it all yourself. And there's, again, like so many people out there with great ideas, and the more you connect, the better all the work is going to be.
And then the 5th and final type of work is teamwork. So what does teamwork mean to you?
Teamwork makes the dream work. No, I think it's, for me, it's knowing, again, that you can't do it all yourself. In fact, when I took this job, someone said to me, the key to being a CEO and being effective is surrounding yourself with people who are smarter, not necessarily smarter. They could be smarter, but also they have more expertise than you do in a bunch of different areas, because no one person can possibly know everything about everything. But if you know that your senior team and your staff members are experts in what they do, and you help to support those people and make sure there's no obstacles in their way, then I can just sit back and let everyone else do all the work.
Yeah, next. So Tony, you talked about the LBW, the long, lonely, boring work. So can you tell us about the LBW inside of your career?
Yeah, I think that there are certain things you have to do yourself to get yourself ready and prepared to do this kind of work. I'd like to think it's not necessarily boring, but sometimes working on your own can be a little boring, and different people are better at that than others or whatever, are able to focus in that environment. But I think when I think back to when I was in college, you're trying to invest in yourself and learn stuff so you can go out in the world and give back. And sometimes it's easy to be distracted and say, I think I'll just like knock off and go to whatever, the football game or whatever it might be. But sometimes you have to just buckle down and be like, nope, I'm going to go to the library. I'm going to get this paper done in this chair until it's done. Because sometimes the hardest thing, I studied something and now where there's a lot of writing. So political science, there's a lot of things to write. And I think in the job I'm in now, and one of the biggest obstacles to writing, I think, is sitting yourself down and not letting yourself be distracted by other things. And that is sometimes the long, boring work. It can be a little lonely, but I think it's worth it in the end.
I just have a couple more questions
Okay.
for you. Ian, you talked about how when you first got into this position, I kind of want to talk about like what made you feel like you weren't ready or good enough to take this position?
Yeah, I think I had seen other community foundation presidents or CEOs, and I think sometimes you always see like the experience that other people have that you think you don't have without realizing that maybe you yourself have experience that they don't have. But I definitely saw a lot of other community foundation CEOs that I felt like had these big jobs in Washington, or had led a college or a university, or things that I just hadn't done in my career. Like my career had a different path. Or a lot of community foundation CEOs come from the fundraising perspective, where they've done a lot of big capital campaigns and raised tons of money. And so I feel like I had done little bits and pieces of some of those things, but also a bunch of other work that maybe those folks hadn't done. And I just worried that like I wouldn't have the full experience. And I'm not sure I totally understood what the job was either. And so without knowing that, it's hard to take the leap and say, yeah, I think I can figure that out. But I mean, I think the other thing I've learned is that nobody is the president and CEO of a community foundation until they do it. And if you knew how to do it and you were like great at it already, you probably actually wouldn't even want that job, because now you'd want the next job where you'd learn something. So I think that having the confidence to take that leap, I had to work myself up to that, but I'm really glad I did.
Awesome. So the last question is, what's one fun fact about yourself that nobody really knows?
Whew, that nobody knows. Let's see. Just very few people know that during COVID, I decided to learn the ukulele, and I learned how to play and sing Happy Birthday, because I thought that would be really fun for the people in my life.
That's awesome.
And it actually was really fun. I dropped it a little bit after COVID, and I need to return to that. But it's on my list of things to do.
That's awesome. And I want to thank you again for coming on. So I truly appreciate you taking the time out of your day to come on. Thank you again.
Thank you so much for having me. This has been really fun, and I am really excited about the work you're doing. I think it's really important.
Thank you. Thank you for all the advice that you just gave to me. I truly appreciate that. So thank you.
Sure. My pleasure. I'm happy to do it.
Thank you. I really do mean this. So, Ian, thank you again for coming on to the podcast. I do truly appreciate you taking the time out of your day to come on. So thank you again.
I'm really happy to do it, and I think it's amazing work you're doing.
Thank you.
Any way we can support it, I'm happy to do it.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And I also appreciate all of you for all the support you have shown me in this past year, my journey of becoming a realistic CEO. So ways that you can support even more is by going onto our website, www.realisticceo.com, and ordering your copy of the Realistic CEO book, as well as our new book, Unrealistic, and our magazine, the Realistic CEO Podcast Magazine. Ways that you can support even more is we actually have a section where you can gift the books called the gifting section, where we gift books to students in lower to moderate income communities. And lastly, you could become a partner, where we have a partnership where we go into the schools in behalf of your business. So I do truly appreciate all the support you guys showing me. See you in the next episode. Peace.